And let's take a closer look at this EU-Ukraine trade deal with Brian Beary. He's a Washington correspondent for Europolitics. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jessica.
Let's first of all talk about this deal and the fact that Ukrainian businesses will be able to avoid EU tariffs and restrictions as long as their products meet EU standards. How much of a boon could that be to the Ukrainian economy?
It's a huge benefit for the economy. Let's remember the EU is a single market of about 510 million people. Far bigger, for example, than the Russian economy, as large an economy as Russia is, and it's basically going to integrate Ukraine into the EU's economy. There's still a long way to go, but there's huge potential both on the export and import side. So anybody in Ukraine who wants to draw closer to the West, to this sort of more affluent common market area, this would certainly be a day of celebration for them.
Let's talk about the impact, though, on the investment side. I mean, part of the deal is designed to force Ukraine essentially to follow anti-corruption rules and intellectual property protection rules that the European businesses have to follow. In the medium to long term, could that actually help Ukraine attract more international investment again?
Absolutely, and that is what the business elites in Ukraine are really fervently hoping for. Ukraine has had a terrible record in the last 20 years on corruption, and the comparison is often made with its neighbor Poland, whose GDP has doubled in the last 10 years since it became a member of the European Union. Has much lower levels of corruption, higher quality of governance, all linked to its EU membership bid and now full membership. A lot of Ukrainians wish that they had sort of gone along the Polish path and were in better shape than they are today.
Of course, Ukraine gets more than half of its gas from Russia, and Moscow is threatening to turn off the gas, hike up the prices in retaliation. Are we likely to see that happen soon?
I would not be surprised at all. But let's remember that this is something that Russia and Ukraine have been fighting over for many years. Even before this EU trade deal was on the table, Russia and Ukraine have been arguing over the price of gas that Ukraine should pay to Russia. And there have been cutoffs several times in recent years, and I would be surprised if we did not see another such incident.
What about the status of sanctions against Russia? I mean, the EU seems to be holding a fresh batch in reserve, essentially. What would cause them to levy more sanctions?
You know, I think an escalation of the conflict in eastern Ukraine and an indication that Russia was clearly trying to escalate the conflict and trying to break up Ukraine would cause that. But to be perfectly honest, I see the exact opposite at the moment. I see that the EU, now that it has Ukraine signing this agreement, doing its best to sort of improve, repair relations with Russia. They have notably told Russia that they are willing to discuss the implementation of their trade deal with Ukraine and how that might affect Russia. Now, that's new conciliatory language. When Russia asked for that 6 months ago, when Yanukovych was supposed to sign the deal, Brussels said, no way, this is a bilateral deal, we're not talking to you about this. Now they seem to be changing their tune, but let's remember, Ukraine has now signed the agreement, so we're talking about implementation.
Well, and also there's this extension, at least for the next 3 days, of the ceasefire. Does that also sort of play into giving both the parties more time to work on the friction that's there?
Yeah, I definitely think on the EU side, and I would imagine on the Russian side also, given how its economy has been hurt in the last few months by the uncertainty, that there is good motivation on both sides to improve the relationship. But of course, if the situation on the ground in eastern Ukraine gets worse, then that makes it very difficult to try and thaw out that icy relationship between Europe, the US, and Russia.
Let me get you to quickly to weigh in on the controversy over EU, the new candidate, the new EU leader, I should say, and help us understand why Luxembourg's former Prime Minister Jean-Claude Juncker is a controversial choice.
Many people are asking the same question. He's actually a pretty centrist, moderate type of guy. He's not a huge pro-EU integration type candidate. A lot of people think David Cameron just wanted to make a stand and show that he, takes a different viewpoint. But one of the most important reasons was because the European Parliament, this time, for the first time ever, decided that it would name different candidates for the job. And whoever won the European Parliament elections in May, that the candidate of that political group should be the Commission President. And Juncker's party won the elections, and Juncker was their candidate. So on a point of principle, Great Britain, the UK wanted to say that it's actually not written in the European Treaty that the European Parliament gets to pick the European Commission President, and that it's a very dangerous precedent. So I think the process, more than the personality, was the problem for the British.
All right, our thanks to you for that explanation, Brian Beary from Europolitics. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Jessica.